I'm your producer, Todd Bartu, and this is Offshore Explorer. Offshore Explorer looks at the world from the sailor's point of view, port by port. Together, we share stories that detail the important intersections between sailing, culture, and life, past, present, and future. Coming up on today's episode, a small Italian coastal town that has been the home to writers and poets for centuries, the town of Lerici, Italy. But first, let me introduce our host, a lifelong sailor who has traveled the world, raced international 14s and cross-Atlantic countless times, a published author who has written for both stage and screen, Mr. Scott Dodgson.
Hey Todd, how are we today?
We're doing great. I just wanted to mention that we're on a couple of new platforms over the last couple of weeks. In case you've noticed, we've gotten a bunch of people coming in from Pandora and from iHeartRadio app, and we're also on Amazon Music. So welcome to all of our listeners there. Welcome.
Yeah, and I want to say thank you to, and I think we can safely say this. I want to say thank you to all the people around the world. On my Facebook page, I posted a picture of all the places that people are listening to Offshore Explorer around the world. And it is unbelievable. And I am so humbled and so grateful for the listenership from China to Australia, all over Europe, Africa. We're huge in South America. Very, very, very happy about it and very grateful, and I want to thank everybody for that.
Yeah, we got everybody, all the continents except for Antarctica.
Right.
So, what do we have planned for today's episode?
Well, today's episode is the Gulf of Poets. It's about Lerici, Italy, which is just down the way from La Spezia and around the corner, so to speak, from the Cinque Terre, which is actually internationally famous. And we're going to mix a little poetry, Percy Shelley, and boats and sail plans, eating Italian. And I might say that the show is a little more designed around what we do for our television show, Offshore Explorer with Scott Dodgson, which hopefully will be on later next year if we ever are allowed to leave our houses. But the design of the show, it includes some interesting stories and interesting experiences in a very tiny, very authentic Italian seaside town.
Okay, great. Take it away, Scott.
Today I want to talk about a small town in Italy at the very bottom of the Bay of La Spezia. La Spezia is a moderately large town where the Italian Navy is actually based. It's a lovely, lovely town, a little gritty, a little old. It's got a beautiful university there, lots of history. But I lived in a little town called Lerici. Lerici is famous as being the home for Percy Shelley, Byron, Mary Shelley, the romantic poets of 1800, 1820, 1830, 1900s. They escaped, in a certain way, they would say, they escaped the political and social damage that was going on in England, essentially to found a whole new way of looking at poetry, spirituality, and it proved to be, this is 150 years later, to be really a fundamental movement, a fundamental way of changing our perception. Now, I focus on Percy Shelley because he was a sailor. And he was a sailor that got caught up in doing something that I think a lot of us think about. Some of us have tried to do it, and some of us find out that it's not really worth doing, and that is to build a sail on your boat that's either too large or too heavy for your rig. This is a pretty important thing, because sailing back in the day during Percy's time, he had a boat actually built in Genoa, and he kept it down in Lerici, and there's a couple little small towns that are all connected to the town of Lerici, and you can literally walk between the towns. I mean, they're less than a mile, but they're small towns, and there's a little cove on the other side of the castle where he kept his boat. And the mast was wood, the boat was wood, of course, and the sails, in this case, were made of cotton. He had the sails made for him, and he put an oversized sail, and he put a sail on that was too heavy. And I relate this to my own experience when I was redoing the sails of my boat. I went to North Sails, and I mean, there's other sail makers, but this North Sails, I had a lot of confidence, and I was in the Caribbean. I was in St. Martin, actually, and I went in and said, look, I really would love to have a new mainsail. And they looked up in their library on the computer of all the sails that could be for my boat. In fact, they had specific Robert Perry recommended sails for my boat. And I thought, oh, this is great. This is exactly what I need. But then I sort of started to overthink myself. And thanks to the guys at North Sail, they said, you know what? You got a wood mast. You probably shouldn't go with a heavier cloth. And I kind of didn't listen to them in the beginning. And I ordered I forget how many ounce, but it was like a half an ounce more than was recommended. They delayed in actually making that sail, and I was really happy that they did. I had to put a deposit down for them to make the sail for me, and I just, I was very insistent that I wanted something sturdier, something stronger, because I had done so much sailing, and it was in the Caribbean and the Mediterranean and all the transatlantics that I was doing. I was really wearing out the lighter weight sails. And I thought, okay, I had it stuck in my mind. If I had a heavier weight sail, I would be able to let the sail last a little bit longer and with less wear and tear, better UV protection. I mean, I went through every kind of rationalization to have a heavier, thicker sail. And I have a feeling that Percy Shelley kind of went through the same thing. He's very famous, obviously, for his poetry and his lifestyle. He believed in spirituality. He believed in defending the human spirit rather than the religious human spirit. And this movement, his wife, Mary Shelley, she wrote Frankenstein. Go figure. What an interesting couple. And their best friend, Lord Byron, of course, is very, very famous for, attaching himself to every military cause that there was and writing brilliant poetry. And his wife also was a great writer. And so this group which is a group that's very rare in literature. It comes up every 100 or so years, in which you have a really brilliant group of people that can write and have a tremendous vision of the world. Lerici is a place that this was quite common for writers, musicians, filmmakers, and it still is today. I lived in Lerici for 2 years while I was building a boat in the San Lorenzo yard, which is only about a 20-minute drive away from Lerici. And I would go for what I call the triangle, La Spezia to Livorno and down to Ventimiglia. And in Ventimiglia, which is the southern part of they call the Gulf of Poets, that's where they build a lot of Italian-style boats. San Lorenzo is down there now. Falcon, which is a beautiful power boat, as well as a number of others. Perini Navi has been down there for years, and it's a real center for shipbuilding. And if you ever have if you love shipbuilding and you love modern yachts and powerboat, I love everything. I don't go by the, he's a powerboat or stink pot, or I don't go by any of that bullshit. If you think that way, you're missing out on a lot of stuff. But down in Ventimiglia is just absolutely wonderful. You can go down there and wander around and watch mega yachts. You can see the mega yachts being built. And they get some great food, great restaurants. It's a lot of fun. And the chandleries and the artisans that are down there that build these boats are just second to none. They're the best in the world and very Italian and very exciting to watch. And you can wander around, the shipyard, the dockyard, and all the rest. It's not. It's very Italian. It's like, yeah, hey, how you doing? We're building a boat here, whatever. So that's sort of like the bottom part. So that was a part of my life down there. Livorno was a place where Percy Shelley had sailed down to from Lerici, and he met Lord Byron. He was Lord Byron at that point, and they were going to have a new book and a new journal and on romanticism. Now, I know a lot of you guys are sitting there going, what the hell is this guy talking about, romanticism? Well, if you dream of being on a boat, if you dream of sailing on a boat, if you dream of cruising around the world, you are a romantic. Until 1800s, 1790 to 1800s, the age of sail, the idea of going around the world, romanticism didn't exist. You didn't dream about going to some foreign land. You dreamt about what your next meal was. You dreamt about how to stay out of jail, how to stay out of debtor's prison. Life was ugly. Life was fascist. It was an ugly place. Romanticism touched people's spirits, so it gave them hope. So if you poo-poo the idea of romanticism, you're actually poo-pooing your own dreams. And this falls into what one of the most famous poems that Percy Shelley had written, Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an antique land who said 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them, on the sand, half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that it's the sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed. And on the pedestal these words appear, my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round and decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away. And what this poem is about fallen empires and fallen leaders who thought themselves above all of us. And this was the beginning of this poem was so well received. It made him a huge star. And in fact, the Italians sort of referred to him as a rock star, because, and Byron as well, because they talk about Shelley in the same way, and Byron, both of them, they talk about them as rock stars. I mean, the good die young. And that's what happened when Shelley, taking his boat, which was oversailed, and coming up from Livorno in a storm and sinking. His body washed up on the beach. And I'll tell you something about that beach. Approximately, his body washed up like 10 days after he went missing. His body washed up on a beach between Livorno and Lerici, and the beach there is sort of interesting in the sense that it's a really long, sandy white beach, and the white isn't what you think it is. It's actually marble, chips of marble that have come down from the mountains. And in fact, if you stand there and you look up at the mountains, this happened to me. I look up at the mountains and I see wow, these must be really tall mountains because they're white. They look like they have snow on them. And I looked at them and I was really puzzled by it. But then I figured out exactly what it was. They have been harvesting marble up in these mountains for so many thousands of years that all the chips that were left has created this image on the mountain of snow, of whiteness, because the mountains aren't very high at all. So this beach is full of marble, chips of marble. And in fact, there's this little sort of dock where what I would call an island type transportation open carrier comes in, and they load on this thing. They have a big crane. They load marble on it. And this little tiny ship, has all this marble on it, and it takes marble wherever they want to sell it. And you can go into the little store. There's a little store right there. And they have all these little things that are carved in marble. If you wanted to buy it in the United States, it'd probably cost you, ridiculous amounts of money to have a bowl of hand-carved marble. But in this little store, it's just this is what the guys do in their spare time. They make little crosses, they make little bowls, they make all kinds of little, Jesus Christ, all of these things, they carve them out, and they're beautiful and they're very inexpensive because nobody ever goes there. It's just like a local town kind of thing. So anyway, Percy Shelley drowned, because his boat, and his wife actually writes about it, saying that she was very concerned because he had too much sail on his boat, and the sail was too heavy. Which gets me back to what I wanted to do on my boat. And I was eventually convinced by the guys over at North Sail in St. Martin that, look, just do this. You don't need to put a heavy thing in, because it's going to get, when it gets wet, strong winds, it's just too much weight. So I opted to listen to them, which I go back and think is one of the best things that I ever did. And I did have them build a heavier storm sail, which I could use. I did have them build heavier storm sail, which Obviously I would need that. But for the most part, I went with what the recommended weight for the sail was. And I love those guys. I'm going to eventually do a piece on the guys at North Sail. And, they talk about all the racing sails and all the rest of that kind of jazz, and, the history of the rigging and everything like that. But, because there's a lot of advances in sails and a lot of different kinds of laminates and, different fibers that make the sail great. But, sailing and sails have always been either cotton or flax. And they don't last a long time, and they rot, and they rip, and they do a lot of other things. But that's what people used for thousands of years. So if you've never seen that, and I should say duck, they call it duck cloth, which is used quite a bit on boats. If you have a bag, sometimes they make bags out of duck cloth, or they'll make a jacket out of duck cloth today. I actually have a jacket that is made of duck cloth. And it's an old-fashioned sort of heavy cotton thing. It comes from a Dutch word of doek, which is sail, and the English sort of turned it into duck, and now it's called duck cloth. Just little trivia kind of idea there. The whole idea of sailing, and especially in this area of La Spezia, is up and down the coast of La Spezia, is from Ventimiglia to Livorno. And Livorno is, by the way, a place you could stop with your boat. It's an okay little marina. Ventimiglia's got a big marina. Lerici is not a place. You can anchor outside the quay there, but for the most part it's just local power boats, little local fishermen. People like to run over to Porto Venere, which is on the tip, of where you begin to see the Cinque Terre. Everybody knows the Cinque Terre. It's been talked about and written about. It's fantastic. All the 5 little towns that hang on the cliffs and all of that. And Porto Venere is the tip of that peninsula. And that peninsula is a part of, on the east side is part of La Spezia, and on the west side it's the Mediterranean. So those little areas, there's a ferry that leaves from Lerici that goes there to Porto Venere, and then there's a ferry that goes around to the Cinque Terre. So you get a lot of tourists doing this, but they don't stop in Lerici. And, there's some tourists there, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, it's kind of a forgotten tourist town. Now, I had actually sailed into La Spezia many years before, and I went up into La Spezia. There's a marina that's up near the city. I mean, Lerici is only like 4 kilometers south of it, but there's a nice little marina up there. I went in there just out of curiosity, and I'm going to talk about this trip I did one summer. I had sailed over, and I had gotten a one charter that the charter was to sail all the way around Italy, for the whole summer. That was my job. That's what I was going to do. So I had one family, and we would sail all the way around. We started in Monaco, and we picked up the family. They were from somewhere in northern Italy, and they were very wealthy. And the grandmother, she was sort of in charge of the whole thing, and they loved the boats. And so the idea was to sail slowly all the way around Italy and stop and see everything, see their country from the sea. So literally I spent the entire summer sailing all the way around Italy, all the way around Sicily, all the way up the east coast of Italy, all the way up into the Dalmatians, and that's where I let they get off the boat. They were often on the boat all throughout the period. I mean, we stayed in Ventimiglia for like 2 weeks. We stayed in Rome. We were in Rome for like 2 weeks, 10 days. And we kept going. We went to Sardinia, where we spent a great deal of time in Sardinia. They went with me on the crossing over to Sardinia. Weren't very happy because we had very kind of hard weather. But once we got to Sardinia, they kind of dug it. But they actually flew back to Italy, and then I picked them up in Sicily. So I had the opportunity for one summer to literally sail around all of Italy. And La Spezia was a town that they really wanted to go to. Very interesting town, industrial to a certain extent, beautiful university, as I said before. But they were really obsessed with Lerici. Lerici is a town that a lot of very wealthy Italians from northern Italy will go to in the summer, and they will rent places there. It's also a place where you find quite a few artists, musicians, and etc. And it's just quintessential Italian, and it's very, very beautiful. So I first got there. I got there this second time to go build a boat in San Lorenzo. I had been driving back and forth from Antibes to San Lorenzo. It's like a 4-hour drive. And I would come to the shipyard, and I would be there for a few hours, then have to turn around and come back, or I'd stay in a hotel, spend 2-3 days in the shipyard. And I was supervising the build of this one boat, which was a 120-foot power boat, San Lorenzo. And then they wanted to build another boat. So we were building 2 boats at the same time. And there was a lot of work to be done when you're representing the owner of the boat as a surveyor. You have to watch every detail. And I've talked about building boats like that before, and it's complex, it's interesting, and you bang your head against a lot of walls then. But when I finally went into Lerici, because I didn't see it really as a town there's a lot of towns like it. I didn't see anything special about it, but I did know that it was a place where Byron and Shelley, and I know about the Gulf of Poets, and being a literature major and really interested in, writing and all the rest of that stuff, I decided, okay, this is a place that I'm going to live in this town because there's no other 20 minutes to get to the shipyard. And I'm going to, really suck up the atmosphere. So I drove into town, and coming into town is you come down this, long winding road. There's a couple of buses and stuff where they let the tourists off in this little parking lot. And then the tourists walk down, they get on the ferry, and they take them over to the Cinque Terre. And they're like not even there, like in La Spezia or in Lerici for only a few minutes. And it's like, yeah, hi, bye. And, it's the old tourist kind of thing. But parking is very difficult down there, and just not anyone can park down there. You have to have a special sticker, and you have to be, you have to live in Lerici, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I went down, and I went to a realtor, and I eventually found there were 2 places for rent, and I found a 2-bedroom apartment. And this 2-bedroom apartment is up on the side of the hill. Now, the thing that a lot of people don't realize about Lerici when they're walking around, Lerici is you're either up or you're down. It's up the side of a hill. It's not as extreme looking as you would see on the Cinque Terre, but it's severely uphill. And there's this gigantic castle that is also there. And it was built in like 1152 and is maybe one of the ugliest castles that ever existed. But it's been there a long time, and having been in the castle and having walked around it, it's a pretty imposing place. I mean, I don't see how anybody could conquer this place unless you bombed it from the air. And even then, I think you would be, wouldn't have any great results. So I was very excited to kind of get into the town. And I know we talk about sailing a lot, and we talk, which is part of our thing. But one of the things about this is that the concept of romanticism is so tied up in the idea of sailing boats. I mean, if you're just a technical guy and you go sail boats and you know every single technical thing and this is that, there's got to be a point in which your heart kind of opens up to the romanticism of sailing, because that's a great part of the heritage. So I found this really lovely apartment. It was on the 5th floor. There were 6 floors to the building. You had to walk up marble stairs that were all sort of indented and worn from people shuffling their feet for hundreds of years up these stairs. But from my apartment, I had this view off the balcony of the whole city town of Lerici, which was down below me. I had the whole Bay of La Spezia, and I could see all the way out to Porto Venera. It was one of the most fantastic views you could ever imagine. And that was like on one side of the house. On the other side, where the kitchen was, there was another thing, and it was the path that led down to the town. And so this was my main thing, which is I would walk downhill in the morning, and I would buy a newspaper at the kiosk, the local kiosk. And it was so lovely because, when you travel and you live places, and if you have an open mind and an open heart, you could meet like so many cool people and learn so many cool things. So while I'm building this boat and getting to know the people that are building a boat and learning a tremendous amount about, how to lay fiberglass, how the molds work, different, how they put the engines in, how they line up props, and literally watching people that do this for a living and all the time, rather than like most of us, we buy a boat, it's already built, off we go, right? Now it's a lot of fun. It's a really interesting learning experience, and it's one thing to understand it intellectually. It's another thing to actually physically watch somebody, line it up and put it up and have it come out perfectly. So that part of the learning was going on, but the part of learning about being a sailor and seeing the world from a mariner's eyes is when you go to visit people and you do like normal things, like go and get the newspaper. The guy in the kiosk insisted that he was going to teach me how to count in Italian. And so we would have these little counting lessons in Italian. And then I would take the paper and he would give me back the change. He said, how much is it? He could speak a little English. He said, how much is it? And then we'd have to go back and, and we would go back and forth, and I was learning a little bit of Italian here, a little bit of Italian there. But this was an everyday thing, and it was very pleasant. It was very, very nice. I mean, I worked on my Italian a little bit. I kind of got it into a good space, and, that I could, first of all, ask for things. Second of all, I could count. Third of all, I could understand a small, brief conversation, a broken conversation, but not very much in depth. So there was another little store that I used to go into, which was the wine store. Now, I love going into these little wine stores because I had actually thought when I was in this little wine store of setting up a business of exporting famous wines that were not exported. Because, most wine that is made, often like in Italy or in France in particular, these wines are never exported. They're usually small batch wines made by local farmers and vineyards, from vineyards that are, right next to some big vineyards. They don't have a lot of the chemicals in. It's just good old-fashioned, beautiful winemaking. And these wines are really, really, really delicious. And oftentimes they're very inexpensive. So, I love red wine. I'm sure a lot of the guys out there have a glass as they're listening to this, or will have a glass. And, so I'm in this little shop, and the owner of the shop is showing me, okay, this comes from this place, and this comes from this place. He's got a little map, and he's showing it, and they're very, very sort of parochial in the idea. This. I know this guy. I know this guy over here. His son goes to school, so with my son, and he only makes about 1,500, 2,000 cases, which is a small amount of wine, a year. And but this is really his best wine, and this is really something you should have. And I used a lot of these wines because the owner of the boats that I was building, he was actually a partner in a vineyard in France, but he and his wife both loved Italian wines. So I was buying kind of sample cases of wine for the boat, and I was sampling them, daily. So I would stand there, and he would show me different wines and sip different wines. I'd buy a couple of bottles of this, I'd buy a couple of bottles of that. And it was just, he would tell me the history behind this particular wine. And in the meantime, while he's telling me about these wines, he also would drop in these little things about, Lord Byron used to come by here. Back in the day, this wasn't a wine shop, it was a candle shop, and Byron used to buy candles in this very shop. And I'm thinking to myself, a lot of people will go on these journeys to discover a writer, an author, or a painter, and go to all the places that he lived, knock on the window and say, hey, did Byron leave anything? Did Shelley leave anything here? And you would never find this information out, that this was a candle shop where Byron bought his candles. And I was just kind of like, yeah, that's pretty cool. So we're having a glass of wine, because you walk in, he's got wine, he opens a bottle, there's a little bit of cheese, some bread, you drink, and you talk to him, and he's wonderful. But one of the things he told me about, which I found and stayed with me for a long time, is the bell tower. In Italy, bell towers are very, very important, as they are in Portugal, in Spain. Very important in France, not quite as important as they are in Italy, because the town pride is tied up in the bell tower. And when the bell tower rings, it is a reminder, poetically, it is a reminder of all those people that have passed, and all the glories of weddings, and all the glories of births, and everyone in the town that goes to that church or listens to the bell tower as it goes across, and you can really hear it goes across everywhere. There is a reminder when that bell tolls of your connection to the town, to the people, and to the most important events in life. And this is a very poetic concept. We don't have bell towers here, but the tower also functions in another way, and it functions for sailors. Because the tower is so tall, okay, a lot of early navigation was done from the tower. In fact, you could see the tower with binoculars and on a clear day, you could see from Porto Venera, which is across the bay, okay, to Lerici, and you could see the tower there. And you could use that tower as a landmark from wherever you're coming in. If you're coming up the coast from Ventimiglia and Livorno, you won't see it until you round the bend, but you'll know that's the town. Now, I know a lot of you guys sailing out there, you get yourself a couple of miles off the coast, and the coast all looks about the same. I know from my friends here in Southern California, I usually say that the whole coast of especially Southern California, the whole coast basically looks like the Italian coast. It's the same color, it's the same rise of the hill. It's got cliffs. It's very impenetrable where you put your boat. There's long areas of just surf. Not good. But we'll get into LA and all of that. There's some really interesting things about that. But anyway, this Lerici was, famous for Percy, famous for Byron, famous for the family and the romanticism, famous for other wonderful people that had been there. And it was in 1822 that Percy Shelley drowned and died. So I was standing in this wine shop and talking about the bell tower, the belfry, and getting the whole history and why it's so important, and it's important in every Italian town. It's important because it's an effort to show that the town is got money, it is worthwhile, and it's actually used as sort of a marketing device, even though it's usually connected to the Catholic Church. And but it's the town elders put a lot of money into building this tower because it makes the town better, and it's poetically a reminder, as I said, to all the important events that there are in life. And I repeat myself in that because I want you to really think about it, that it's something that we don't have in the United States very much, maybe in some small towns, but you don't really hear the bell tolling very much. At least I don't. And I kind of, I miss that purpose and what that community that it creates. Shelley's boat was called the Don Juan, and it was built up in Genoa. And he would sail out to Porto Venera, and he would turn back, and then he would race the other Italian feluccas back to Lerici. And the last port he was in was Livorno, and he was setting course up for San Terenzio, which is a little tiny town next to Lerici. You wouldn't even know you were in San Terenzio unless you saw the sign. And that was the last time he was seen in July of 1822. That part of the world, you can get some serious weather, and it comes up fast, and it comes up hard, and it just slams up against the coast of Italy. It's often called a scirocco that comes up, and it can be very, very ugly. I've actually used the scirocco to sail on the coast of North Africa very simply, and just a nice broad reach with a scirocco of about 35, 40 knots, and very little waves, sort of flat seas, and just boogie along. It's some of the greatest sailing I've ever done in that regard. But in any case, the little town of Lerici was my little town. So I was very excited almost every day to walk down the long, steep path of stairs down into town and start walking around. That's where I bought my newspaper. I had a relationship with the wine guy, and I was busy. I would walk up and down the piazza and, stop in and look at some of the local stores. I'm not a big shopper per se, but I did discover this one little restaurant, which is actually a 5-star restaurant, called Idora. And Idora is owned by this girl. Her father owns another restaurant. It's a restaurant in a family, and the food there is just ridiculously good. And I learned for the first time in my life how Italian meals work. In America, when you order a meal, you expect to get let's say you order roasted chicken. So you're going to get part of a chicken, you're going to get sides. You're going to get some maybe French fries or potatoes, and there's going to be green beans or whatever the case. So your whole meal comes all in one plate. In Italy, you have to order plates one at a time. And then you eat the plates when they all arrive at your table. I didn't know this. So the first time I was there, I ordered, I forget what it was, some seafood. And that's all that came on the plate was just the seafood. I think it was shrimp. Or no, it was langoust. And so there's just langoust on the plate. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I'd like some French fries to go with this. And what else do you have to go with it? So it took me about 20 minutes to realize that I had to order all the plates. And then they all come. And they would all sit on the table. And then we could eat off of the plates. So if you ever go to Italy and you say, oh, yeah, I want this. I want a bowl of spaghetti and meatballs. And you get just a bowl of spaghetti and meatballs, and there's no salad. You'll probably get bread, but you have to probably order bread. And you'll just be aware that you have to pick up both. Now, the nice thing about Italy, and especially Lerici, is that it's very small. You can get around the town virtually just by walking. And when I was walking along, I was down there in the evening because it's very beautiful, and a lot of people like to walk up and down the promenade and, in the evening. And there's a couple of bars there. You could sit at tables. You could have some wine. Do yourself a favor and really look up Lerici and La Spezia. It's definitely worth putting on your bucket list. I mean, if you're going to go see Cinque Terre, okay, great. That's great. But really, this is really get into what I love is being a part of a community or learning to be a part of a community, what the community is about. So within a few months, I'd already known about the bell tower. I had already known that the wine shop used to be where they made candles, and Byron used to buy his candles, which was a nice little tidbit for me. I had learned about the sail being oversailed, and I was building a yacht in a yard with really professional people. And I gotta say, this is one of the most exciting, really was one of the most exciting times of my life. And I thoroughly enjoyed myself from day to day. But what really made my day was, I love a good bar. All right. I just love a good bar. And, I love you can go and sit on a stool, have, conversation, have a drink, relax. The music's not too loud. People can converse, can go on this, that. Well, I found one. And this bar was really more unique than I thought I would ever find. La Spezia, the bigger town above Lerici, is where the Navy base is. And there's a lot of shipping that goes in and out of that. I mean, historically, it's a kind of an interesting place because it used to be during, after World War II, and actually before World War II, a lot of refugees, Jewish refugees, would go to La Spezia, and they would get on ships. 3 ships took thousands of Jewish refugees from Italy, and took them to Israel. And La Spezia is very famous as being the departure point for that. And there's a couple of towns. La Spezia is a name that reverberates in Israel. And it's a very interesting concept because these people were literally running for their lives. Italy had become incredibly fascist, and the racism that goes with fascism, at that point, it was the Jews that were the object of that. And La Spezia was a place where people could, find a boat to Israel and get out. And it is a really important place in that regard. So that's just like this little kind of interesting tidbit of history, and is a lot of shipping there. So I found this little bar, Il Boro, and I go in, and it's just one of those long sort of cave type bars. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. It's got a little open in the front, but really the bar itself is down a dark, long cave, so to speak. Well, it turns out that it's great. It's a great atmosphere, all stone inside, just great. I got a TV in there, and they play, of course, football on the TV, and there's motorsports, and in Italy, it's like soccer Americans, but football first, auto racing second, and I mean Formula One auto racing, motorcycle racing after that, and then anything else kind of falls into that. And Italian TV is the most bizarre, TV anywhere in the world. And it's hilarious. Even when it's trying to be serious, it's hilarious. So in this bar, the girl I'm talking to, she's English. And great. Somebody who speaks English. I can talk to her and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just sitting in there having a drink. And finally I get the whole history, and I'm looking around, and I'm seeing all these guys in there, and they don't look Italian. They look foreign. And I suddenly realized, and then there's some Italian guys come in, and I kind of seen these Italian guys come in. And I asked the girl about the bar. I said, what's the history of this place? This is really amazing. What's the history of this place? And it turns out her father was a merchant marine. And they used to come to La Spezia, and they would offload the ships, and they would get time off because La Spezia also exported marble and a lot of grain and feed, a lot of crafts and wood, logs, etc. And so there was a lot of loading ships by hand, longshoreman work. And these guys would get time off. So this guy opened up this bar in Lerici, and he would service the guys that were merchant marines. And so the merchant sailors are, a great group of interesting people, by the way. And so his daughter took over the place after he passed away, and he had actually opened it up just after World War II. And I guess the stories there were pretty crazy. And but in any case, it's well known. A lot of people come, from the ships. It's gotten a little bit more clientele, local or tourists, and people like myself who are living in the town for a couple of years or a couple of months. You're a part of the town when you live through the winter in a town that's a tourist town. That's when you really learn what the town is all about. You kind of actually see the real fibers and the connectedness to the town, and what's important, what's not important, what's tourist, what's regular. And that's when you see that sort of thing. And that's when you really learn all the good stuff. So I was in this thing, and they were telling me about where they used to build boats up on the beach. They talked about the fishing. They talked about, It's not the same as it used to be. Everything's containerized. There's not much work for longshoremen. They do work for the Italian Navy, because La Spezia is a lot of Italian Navy, and there's an American naval base there too. It's actually a submarine base, and very quiet, very subdued, very like, oh yeah, whatever. Don't see it. Doesn't exist. Secret, but not so secret. And so I discovered this great little bar. And the nice thing, I guess it is one way. The nice thing is that I used to go down there. I'd have a couple of drinks, and then I'd have to walk back up the hill, up the steps. There were 458 steps, and that was just to the front door. And then I had to walk up five flights of stairs to get to my apartment. And once I got into the apartment, it was like, I need another drink, because it was just like, it was exhausting. And I had a beautiful apartment. It was just, it was a 2-bedroom, a huge living room, and it was just a magnificent views all around, and I was very, very happy. So one day in my apartment, I had come back from the shipyard. Everything was going well. We were getting ready to launch the boat, and I was actually getting ready to give up the apartment and literally move on the boat. And we were going to take the boat, once we had it splashed down, ready to go, we were going to take the boat to Antibes, which isn't very far away, but that was going to be a trip, and I had to organize myself and get rid of the apartment, because I wasn't going to be living in Lerici anymore. And I was actually offered a job at San Lorenzo, and I didn't take it. And it's one of the few regrets I have. I would have really enjoyed living where I was living, and the whole experience of doing what I was doing. It would have been a really kind of interesting aspect of boating and learning, building mega yachts. And San Lorenzo has done very well. They've gotten very, bigger. Their building has improved, and there's a lot of like really positive things about the shipyard. And so anyway, we were getting ready to go, and it was a Sunday afternoon, and I hear this knock on the door. Now, no one ever knocked on the door. I opened up the door. I was standing there in a pair of shorts, no shirt, and it was very warm. And I open up the door and I look, and there's a priest standing in front of me, and there is a whole train of altar boys and people that are behind him in the stairwell. It must have been about 15 people, and they're all dressed in religious order, and they came in, they walk in the apartment, and they're blessing me and saying prayers and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And the kids are all holding, the supplicas, and it was just like this weirdest thing. It was like, hey, how you doing? Blah, blah, blah. It was like round Easter is what it was. And so they blessed me, and they blessed the house, and they blessed everything that was there. And then off they went, and right down the stairs, and they kept walking. And they go to every single apartment and house in their district. And that's what they do. But that whole idea of connectiveness made me feel very happy, and happy in a way that I was romantically living a kind of spiritual life, that not only was I understanding the romanticism and the technicality behind boats and boat building, I was understanding the life of a poet. I was understanding the life of writers and artists. I was understanding the life of the influence and the importance of the influence of people that are creative on people that are not so much creative, but the whole life is influenced by their writing and by the way they lived. And I found that Lerici was really teaching me that concept. And I'll finish one thing. Every day at 4 o'clock from my apartment, which, by the way, the whole area up where I lived is actually a state park, what we call state park. So you can't cut stuff down. There's a lot of rules and regulations, but we all live in a sort of bird paradise, a lot of birds, lemon trees. And at 4 o'clock every day, the man on the apartment down below the first ground floor level would step out of his apartment, no matter what the weather was, and sing opera. And he had a beautiful, beautiful tenor voice. And I would step out onto the balcony. I couldn't see him because he was right below me, but I couldn't see him. And he would sing. And he'd sing all sorts of beautiful, beautiful operatic songs. And I would sit there and I would look out over the Gulf of Poets towards Puerto Venera and thank myself, thank my lucky stars that the romanticism that Shelley left and Byron left is still alive, and that the spirit of humanity and the spirit of goodness is still alive in people today. And his music soared, and then he would stop, and that would be it, and the birds would sing. And that is what I found in Lerici.
Thank you for tuning in. If you liked this episode, be sure to leave us a review. You can find past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Facebook and at offshoreexplorer.org. Our theme song is sung by Paulette McWilliams, with additional music by Amanu Itomi and Tommy Twain.
Until next time, fair winds and calm seas.